This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Dylan Hackworth.
This is Maureen Bogey.
And this is the Creep Street Podcast. Of course, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. Of course, on our Facebook, there is also a little forum where daily we like to interact with our listeners. It's called Citizens of the Milky Way, a Creep Street fan page. Everyone is welcome to join that. You just click the Let Me In button and one of us will let you in. We just like to daily post articles, funny memes, just interact with our listeners. And of course, if once a week is not enough for you...
And it just isn't.
It isn't, folks.
It's just not. It's not.
It's not. So head on over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast where you can find all sorts of goodies. And of course, you know, at the end of the show, I like to give a shout out to our top tier Patreon subscribers.
That's right.
I got a special little one-time shout out up here at the top, though.
Oh, please. Yes.
To our newest Patreon member, give it up for the monstrous Michaela Shearer.
Yes, Michaela, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of the Creep Street Homeowners Association.
Oh, yes.
Your support means the world, and thank you so much. I hope you enjoy all that sweet, sweet bonus content.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, this is officially the first episode of 2022.
It is. Can you believe it?
Cannot believe it. And you know what? What we were going to do today was strange deaths.
Yes.
Weird death. Not weird, just weird, and then like, what are the odds? Like, very like
yes.
Deaths that had a lot of strange circumstance around them and whatnot.
Right.
But we were like, you know what? We'll still do that. We'll save that for a later time. But let's get 2022 started off on the right foot.
Exactly. We wanted to have kind of some good vibes for us going into the new year. Still, of course, this is still going to be weird. It's still going to be creepy, but we wanted to have a little bit of a positive spin on it.
So, Maureen, what are we talking about today?
Today, we are talking about incredible survivals.
Yes. Now, oftentimes on this show, we talk about people who survived incredible things.
Yes.
This isn't so much about a survival story in terms of, like, wow, the odds were stacked against them. Yes, that is true in these.
Right.
But this is more so, like, on a like, how did they actually physically
How could they have
survive?
Done this? Right.
Like, things that just seem physically impossible to survive.
And yet
they did.
So I think this is going to be a fun episode with some, like I said, some good vibes, some good times. Everyone grab a glass of whatever you're drinking.
Oh, yes.
Get cozy and get ready for the episode, baby.
Oh, yes.
Now, our first story revolves around a woman named Vezna Volvovich. Now, it was January 26th, and 22-year-old Vezna was a flight attendant who'd only been a flight attendant for about 8 months. She was a flight attendant for Yugoslav Airlines, and she was working on a flight that started from Stockholm and went to Belgrade. Now, the funny thing is, Vezna wasn't even supposed to be working this flight in the first place. Another woman named Vezna was supposed to be on the roster, but Vezna Volvovich was added to the roster by mistake. But she decided to work this flight anyway because she always had loved to travel and wanted to take any opportunity she could to travel because they had a stopover in Copenhagen and she'd never been there before.
Oh, very cool.
So she thought, you know what, let's just go for it and let's take this journey. So she was working this flight 367, when they were leaving Copenhagen for Belgrade. At about 46 minutes into the flight, at 4:01 p.m., a bomb went off inside of the DC-9 plane, and it blew up over what is now the Czech Republic. Most of the passengers and the crew got sucked out of the plane because of the plane essentially cracked in half, and the plane immediately became depressurized, and they all flew out of the plane. Vezna, however, was trapped by a food cart that had rolled down and had trapped her in this one little area of the plane.
Right.
Now, Vezna passed out almost immediately because she had very low blood pressure. In fact, her blood pressure was so low that she shouldn't have even had the job that she had in the first place.
Oh, that's right. Because I remember in our one source it said that she had drank a bunch of coffee to pass her physical or her exam.
Like an exorbitant amount of coffee in order for her heart rate to be high enough.
Right.
So that she could pass the medical exam to be a flight attendant. But it turns out, thank God that she had low blood pressure, because that might have been one of the things that saved her life. Like I said, she immediately passed out in this little area of the plane. And the plane continued to fall from about 33,000 feet.
Good God. So that's over 5 miles in the sky, right?
So she fell all that way down inside of this plane. Now, thankfully, the plane fell on some trees, which broke the plane's fall, and also landed on a snowy hill, so the snow also cushioned the fall a little bit as well. Now, a man named Bruno Honky heard screaming / just the crash and went out to investigate. He didn't think there were any survivors when he saw the plane, but when he looked in, he saw Vezna there with her blood-stained turquoise uniform on and no shoes. It was clear that she was alive, but just barely. Thankfully, Bruno was a medic in World War II and was able to help keep her alive until help came. She was taken to a hospital in Prague and was in a coma for a few days. Her brain had hemorrhaged and she had amnesia. She remembers greeting passengers on the plane and then seeing her parents in the hospital a month later. That's all that she really remembers. Now, going back to the fact that she had low blood pressure, the low blood pressure actually kept her heart from exploding on impact, and that is one of the things that helped make sure that she was able to survive this crash, obviously. Now, the doctors did not expect her to live very long after this crash, but she started walking again after just 10 months after the crash, and she attributes her survival to her childhood diet of chocolate, spinach, and fish oil.
Wow, hot damn. Okay.
Hot damn, that'll do it for you, I
so.
guess. She even continued to love flying and wanted to keep being a flight attendant because she didn't remember this very traumatic thing that happened to her, so she still had this love for flying that she still had.
Exactly.
But the airline thought that would not be very good press. So they put her in a desk job, and that's where she remained for a while.
That would be, I understand the rationale.
Yeah, I understand the rationale too, especially because she was really celebrated as a national hero at this point.
Right.
Like, people really knew who she was. People, I don't know if that would really instill confidence in people as they entered the flight if they saw this person that had been in a horrendous plane crash.
Right.
Now, it's never been fully confirmed what happened with this plane crash, but it seems that the bomb was set by a Croatian separatist group that wanted independence from Yugoslavia. And that is kind of how this happened. There was another bomb that went off the same day. It was a train that was going to Belgrade that had gone off that same day as well. There was never any formal arrests that were made around this, but it is believed that is who was to blame for this plane crash.
Wow.
So Vezna she did survive this fall. She, like I said, she had a skull fracture, her brain hemorrhaged, she broke both of her legs and 3 of her vertebrae, and she was temporarily paralyzed, but she eventually was able to walk again, and she did survive this crash.
Incredible.
Isn't that insane?
Absolutely incredible.
I mean, her health issues that stemmed from her incredibly low blood pressure, unfortunately, did cause her to pass away at the age of 66 not too long ago. But she really was someone that lived an incredible life and someone that broke the record for someone who to survive a fall without a parachute. So that is the story of Vezna Volvovich.
Incredible story.
Such an incredible story. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, thank God that she did have that amnesia, because that would be some of the most horrifying things to remember and to keep playing over and over again in your head. I mean, it's like, thank God she couldn't remember what happened to her.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible story.
Now, Dylan, what do you have for us here?
I have one very also incredible story. My story concerns a man named Sutomu Yamaguchi. So jumping back to the Second World War, it's August of 1945, and Yamaguchi is a 29-year-old naval engineer living and working in the Japanese city of Nagasaki for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. However, for the last 3 months, though, Yamaguchi has been in the city of Hiroshima with his colleagues all that summer, working on designing a new oil tanker.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But as it became the day of August 6th, Yamaguchi was finally about to return home to his wife, Hisako, and their infant son, Katsutoshi. That morning, Yamaguchi was headed to the train station with 2 of his workmates when he realized he'd forgotten, I guess it was some kind of an identification stamp that was common in Japan. He had to run back for it, so he returned quickly to his workplace and he got it. And he's headed back towards the train station. Well, it was about 8:15 a.m. local time when Yamaguchi is walking towards the docks when he spots in the sky an American B-29 bomber.
Oh, no.
Specifically the plane Enola Gay. This was the plane that would drop the first of the 2 atomic bombs on Japan. The first bomb was nicknamed Little Boy. Yamaguchi recaps seeing the plane and then seeing 2 small parachutes come from the plane. Suddenly, there was an immense flash of light in the sky that he would later describe as being like, quote, the lightning of a huge magnesium flare. Diving into a nearby ditch, an immense boom rang out. The boom was so intense that it immediately burst Yamaguchi's eardrums. The following shock wave sucked Yamaguchi up from the ground into the air, spinning him around, sending him crashing into a nearby potato patch. In a later interview with the British newspaper The Times, Yamaguchi was quoted saying,
"I don't know what had happened. I think I fainted for a while. When I opened my eyes, everything was dark. I couldn't see much. It was like the start of a film at the cinema before the picture has begun, when the blank frames are just flashing up without any sound."
So much dust and debris were kicked up by the blast that it seemed like nighttime. The sun was completely covered, and he saw a fiery mushroom cloud rise in the sky.
Oh, God. Mushroom clouds. I know, Dylan, that is one of your big fears.
Yamaguchi was in a daze and had suffered burns. He wandered to what was left of the Mitsubishi shipyard, where he was able to locate 2 of his workmates from earlier. Both of them had also survived the blast. The group spent that night in Hiroshima being treated for their injuries. Somehow the trains were actually still operating. And the next day, on August 7th, Yamaguchi, along with his co-workers, made their way to the train station, and they were haunted by the landscape. They said it almost seemed unreal. Bridges were completely blown out, so like they had to pass through water. Like if there was a river, They had to pass through it. And he said they had to push through the dead bodies in the river to get through to the train station.
Oh, my God.
So finally, they board the train station back to Nagasaki, along with all of the other wounded victims. The train arrived at Nagasaki the next day on August 8th. Of course, they're like exhausted and in pain, of course. Yamaguchi made his way to the local hospital for treatment. In fact, the doctor that treated him was a childhood friend of his, but he couldn't recognize him at first because of the blackened burns on his face and hands. They were so severe. Apparently, even his family couldn't recognize him at first, and his own mother, even thought he was a ghost. Now, believe it or not, Yamaguchi, despite being a mess, pulled himself out of bed the next day on August 9th and reported for work at Mitsubishi's Nagasaki offices. Around 11 a.m. that morning, Yamaguchi was called into a meeting with the company director, who wanted a full rundown of everything that had happened in Hiroshima. He seemed convinced that there was no way a single bomb could have caused that kind of destruction. Well, Yamaguchi was sitting in the company director's office trying to explain what had happened when suddenly outside the office window, there was a great flash of light.
Oh my God.
The second of the atomic bombs, this one called the Fat Man, had been dropped on Nagasaki. Immediately, he hit the floor as glass and debris exploded into the room. The second bomb was even more powerful than the first one. But I guess, given how hilly the landscape is and the building he was in had a reinforced stairwell, Yamaguchi actually escaped this blast relatively unharmed.
Wow.
His bandages were blown off, and he was hit by another surge of radiation, which was not good. But in a flash, Yamaguchi ran out of the Mitsubishi building to his home, what was left of the building, hoping and praying that his family was okay. And fortunately, despite some minor injuries, they were. Some of his house had been completely destroyed, but his wife and their son did survive.
Wow.
Obviously, countless thousands and thousands died, and in the years following would die too because of the fallout of these nuclear weapons.
Right.
And Yamaguchi, though, would actually go on to live to the age of 93 when he passed away in 2010.
Wow.
Incredible, right?
Can you, shocking
Incredible.
that he was there for both of those huge blasts.
Yeah.
And not only that he just experienced both of them, but that survived both of them.
He was within 2 miles of ground zero of the blast, too, in both cases.
What the
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Incredible survival story. It's just wild. And they think, they don't know for sure, but they think probably, obviously Yamaguchi got the most recognition for it, but they think there was probably about 165 people that experienced both, that for whatever reason were in Hiroshima and then traveled to Nagasaki.
Oh my God.
And experienced both blasts, but yeah.
Wow, Dylan, thank you for that incredible story of survival. That is amazing.
Thank you. What you got next for us, Momo?
Now, our next story takes place in Russia. This was February 23rd, 2002. A woman named Maria Viricheva was at a gas station when she saw a friend of her boyfriend's there. His name was Alexander Pichuskin. She had just gotten in a fight with her boyfriend and was willing to kind of talk to someone else and saw someone she knew, so she was willing to go over and chat with him. She was only 19 and she was pregnant at this time. He lured her into a park, saying that he either had black market goods that she might like, or maybe he just wanted to show her something. It's not exactly clear how she was lured into the park.
And what year was this? This
was 2002.
Okay.
And as soon as they got into the park, Alexander began to beat Maria and then threw her down. My sources said two different things. Either it was down a manhole or down a well. She fell 20 feet and got caught up in the current. She was just floundering around down there trying to be able to survive and not drown for about an hour. Keep in mind, she was also already beaten and she was pregnant at this time.
Jesus, okay.
Finally, she was able to find a ladder and climbed her way up to the ladder, but unfortunately, the manhole was too heavy for her to open up herself. She started screaming for help when a woman finally found her and got 2 security guards to help lift up this manhole. When she told police, the police thought that she was making this up and refused to do any sort of further investigation, like she just had made this up. She actually had just fallen in and she was embarrassed.
Jesus, okay, okay.
Yeah, isn't that insane?
What a wacky, that's fucking weird.
Well, thankfully, she and the baby did survive this fall and this beating. But the person who did this, Alexander Pichuskin, actually was a serial killer known as the Chessboard Killer, who was caught in 2007. So this man would have killed less people. A lot more people would have been saved if the police had actually believed Maria when she said what had happened to her. Now, Thankfully, like I said, she survived and was able to live to tell the tale and was there to help make sure that there was justice and that he was put away. But we'll do a further episode on the Chessboard Killer, of course, but this is just one story that's incredible that she was able to survive this crazy story, and that if more people had believed her, that more lives could have been saved as well.
Wow.
And like I said, we'll do a full episode on the Chessboard Killer, but just wanted to get this story out there, an incredible story of survival.
Absolutely. Well, I've got one for you.
Dylan, please, what's going on?
This is the incredible story of Captain Timothy Lancaster and the crew of British Airways Flight 5390. This is absolutely one of the wildest things I've ever heard of.
Oh my gosh.
So, as you know, this concerns a Captain Timothy Lancaster and the crew of Flight 5390 at British Airways. Now, this flight took place on June 10th, 1990. The flight was from Birmingham Airport in UK to Malaga Airport in Spain. Now, this particular plane in question was a BAC 111 Series 528 FL jetliner. The flight was piloted by Timothy Lancaster, age 42, and co-piloted by Alistair Atchison, age 39. The flight took off at about 8:20 a.m. local time. Atchison took care of the takeoff, and then during ascent, he passed off control to Captain Lancaster. And as the plane continued to climb, both pilots undid their shoulder harnesses and loosened the straps across their waists. And by 8:33 a.m., the plane had reached an altitude of about 17,300 feet, traveling over the area of Didcot, Oxfordshire. Everything was going as usual, and the cabin crew was even making preparations to serve food and refreshments. Also on board the plane that day was air steward Nigel Ogden. Well, he had just entered into the plane's cockpit when there came a sudden loud bang.
Oh, fuck.
The left windscreen panel, which was on Lancaster's side of the cockpit, had burst open. And the sudden decompression in the cabin caused Lancaster to be sucked up from his seat and pulled out the open window.
Oh my God.
As his body was being sucked out of the plane, his knees caught the control panel, keeping him from slipping entirely out the window. In the sudden burst of chaos, the plane's autopilot was disengaged and the plane began to plummet rapidly toward the ground. On top of that, the flight deck door had been blown inward and it was blocking the throttle control. And because of this, the plane was not only headed downward, but it was gaining speed.
Oh my God, this is giving me so much anxiety.
Keep in mind, all the while, Lancaster's upper half is on the outside of the plane, exposed to the elements. Ogden, the air steward, leapt forward and grabbed Lancaster by the belt before he had the chance to completely slip out. There were two other air stewards on board, and they scrambled to secure loose items that were now whipping around the cockpit. And likewise, they were trying to get passengers to remain calm and instruct them into the proper position for an emergency landing.
Oh my God.
Well, there was another bump in the road. This plane was not equipped with enough oxygen for everyone on board. So Atchison, the co-pilot, quickly disengaged the autopilot and executed what they call a rapid emergency descent to an altitude which was much better in terms of air pressure.
Right.
He then re-engaged the autopilot and broadcasted a distress call. The problem was, because all the sound that you can imagine inside of the cockpit, Atchison can't hear what air traffic control is saying.
Oh God.
And of course, the whole time, Ogden, the air steward, is holding on to dear life to Captain Lancaster with all of his strength. But even in these brief moments, Ogden is already beginning to suffer from frostbite and exhaustion. Coming to his aid were air stewards Simon Rogers and purser John Howard, who took over holding on to the captain. Keep in mind that the wind is constantly pulling at Lancaster, and even with people holding him, he has now slipped several inches farther out the window. They're trying their hard, but they can't hold him in the plane. In fact, his head and torso were banging violently against the side of the plane. The crew, in fact, already thought he was dead. But Atchison, the co-pilot, told them not to let him go. The main concern was that if Lancaster's body slipped out the window, it might hit and damage something on the plane, like the wing or the engine, and then everyone would be dead.
Oh my God, this is, I'm sweating.
So the moments pass with great terror, as you can imagine. But the pilot, Atchison, was able to hear air traffic control enough that he was able to successfully land the plane at Southampton Airport at about 8:55 a.m. local time. In all, the incident lasted only about 22 to 23 minutes. But for over 20 minutes, Captain Timothy Lancaster was flapping in the wind.
Oh my
hanging
God.
on the outside of the plane. Amazingly, though, Lancaster survived. He sustained frostbite as well as a broken right arm, right wrist, and a broken left thumb. He was also in shock, as you can imagine. Also, Nigel Ogden survived with frostbite and a dislocated shoulder and damage to one of his eyes. Miraculously, though, no one on the plane died.
Wow.
An investigation was conducted, and it was found that the windscreen panel had been replaced with an ill-fitted panel as well as the incorrect type of screws. But get a load of this. In less than 5 months, Captain Lancaster returned to work and continued working as a commercial pilot.
Wow.
Until retiring in 2008. And Atchison also continued to work as a pilot, retiring and flying his last flight on his 65th birthday on June 28th, 2015. Here's what Nigel Ogden said of the incident in an interview.
I jumped over the control column and grabbed him around his waist to avoid him getting out completely. His body was bent upwards, doubled over around the top of the aircraft. His legs were jammed forward, disconnecting the autopilot, and the flight door was resting on the controls, sending the plane hurtling down at nearly 650 kilometers through some of the most congested skies in the world. I thought I was going to lose him, but he ended up bent in a U-shape around the windows. His face was banging against the window with blood coming out of his nose and the side of his head. His arms were flailing and they seemed about 6 feet long. Most terrifyingly, his eyes were wide open.
Oh my God.
I'll never forget that sight as long as I live.
Oh my God. That is so chilling, and what an incredible story of survival.
Incredible story.
All of those people had to come together to ensure that this man, like you said, they didn't even think that they were saving someone. They thought that they were just
Holding onto the body so it didn't cause more damage.
right.
Incredible.
Wow, what a story. That's amazing.
Yes, incredible story.
Next, we have another incredible story of survival.
Let's hear it.
Okay, in 1988, Anitra Washington, she was a 30-year-old. She was walking to a friend's house when a man named Lonnie Franklin Jr. offered her a ride. The man was short, and he hopped out of the car, and he started to, kind of chat her up and asked her, over and over again if Washington wanted a ride. And at first, Anitra was kind of like, no, I'm not, into this. I don't really need this. But she actually felt sorry for him, for Lonnie Franklin Jr., and eventually accepted the ride. Ladies, if you have a weird feeling in your gut like you don't want to do it, just don't do it.
Ladies,
don't do it, okay? Not Anitra's fault, of course, but just a reminder for all of us.
trust that little voice in your gut.
In your gut, exactly. After she got into the car, this man, Lonnie Franklin Jr., started going in the opposite direction of her friend's house, saying that he had to go over by to his uncle's house to pick up some money. After he picked up some money from his uncle's house, or at least what he said was his uncle's house, he got back in the car and they started driving, and he said something to her, but Anitra couldn't really hear exactly what Lonnie said, so she turned to him, and the following is a quote from my source. Then, she said, everything went quiet. Soon, she noticed blood flowing from her chest. She reached for the door, but the man stopped her. She recounted his words. Don't touch that door, or I'll shoot you again. Washington said she had not yet realized she was shot. You shot me? She recalled asking. I asked him, why? He told her that she was dogging him out, meaning she disrespected him, she said. He then began to ramble and called her by another woman's name. He refused to take her to the hospital, she recalled, and as she struggled to remain conscious, the man forced himself on her. She tried to defend herself, but she kept passing out. She would awake to the flash of a camera and realized her attacker was taking photographs of her. So this man is sexually assaulting her as she's bleeding out from a gunshot wound to her chest.
Oh, just monstrous.
It's insane, and he took a photo of her as she's bleeding out. This is badass, though. Apparently, she said as she was laying there dying, she said, if I die, I'm going to haunt you.
Oh, damn.
I know, right? That's so badass. I love that. Anitra, pop off. Anitra said that she tried to escape again, and at this point, this man, Lonnie Franklin Jr., just pushed her out of the car and drove off, leaving her for dead. Somehow she was able to drag herself to a home of her friend, and she just laid bleeding on the front porch, waiting for her friend to arrive. And when her friend arrived, she finally called an ambulance. During the attack, Anitra somehow lost her purse that had her ID and everything in it. And about a year later, a man approached her outside of her house. And this man apparently said, "Do you know me?" And she said, "Am I supposed to?" The man returned this purse and her ID and realized that that was the man who had shot her the year before. During the trial of Lonnie Franklin Jr., which wasn't until recently, honestly.
Wait, so he would have gotten away if he hadn't come a year later and said, "Hey, do you know who I am?"
No, that's not the only way that he was caught, but that was just an extra way that she was able to know who it was, that was the man who had done this to her. Because Lonnie, this man, he actually wasn't caught until about 20 years later from all of his crimes. This was another serial killer who had killed many people. How he was caught was through familial DNA. That's how he was caught about 20 years later from all of these crimes that he had committed in the 80s. And Anitra Washington had the chance to speak at Lonnie Franklin Jr.'s trial, and she said, "You are truly a piece of evil. You were right up there with Manson." And after she gave her testimony at the trial, the prosecution actually showed her the photo that Lonnie Franklin Jr. had taken of her as she was laying there dying with the gunshot wound to her chest. He had held on to it all of these years, and prosecution got their hands on it. Yeah, so it's just an incredible story of survival that she was able to keep her wits about her enough to not only survive the story, but able to really be an instrumental person that got him put away, and also was someone that said that she would haunt him.
Yeah.
I mean, damn. That's a good thing to
damn.
say. If you're ever in that situation, I hope to God you never are, but say that you will haunt their fucking ass.
Wow. Incredible story, Maureen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maureen, for all of that research.
Thank you, Dylan, for all of that research as well. That was some great stories of survival. And if you guys have other fantastic, interesting stories of survival, please reach out to us. We'll do another one of these episodes, I'm sure, in the future. So if you have any favorite stories, please reach out to us at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com or DM us on any social media, and we will add it to our next episode.
Absolutely. And of course, let me give you my sources real quick that I use.
Of course.
My sources, the amazing story of the pilot who was sucked out of a plane at 23,000 feet and survived by Claire Reed at ladbible.com. And of course, a smattering of Wikipedia. And The Man Who Survived 2 Atomic Bombs by Evan Andrews at history.com.
Now, for my sources, I have Lone Survivor of Grim Sleeper Killer provides vivid account of ordeal by Steven Caesar at the LA Times.
Oh, is that who that last one was? Mm-hmm. Because Grim Sleeper is another one we get a lot of.
Yeah, that was the Grim Sleeper. That was Lonnie Franklin Jr. And we'll do a full episode on the Grim Sleeper as well. Another one of my sources was Victim Tells Grim Sleeper, You Are Truly a Piece of Evil by Brian Melly at the Los Angeles Sentinel. Another one was Vezna Volvovich, flight attendant who survived jetliner blast, dies at 66 by Richard Sandomir at New York Times. And her plane exploded 33,000 feet in the air, and somehow Vezna Volvovich survived the fall by Katie Serena at allthat'sinteresting.com.
Very nice, very nice. And let's go ahead and read to you the names of our top-tier Patreon subscribers.
Please, you know I love it.
Because we got a new one, too, in this list as well. Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face Via Lungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid, Chris Hackworth, the Oh So Suave, Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker, Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool, Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude, Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand, Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud, Carl Staub, the Firestarter, Heather Carter, the Conqueror, Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, and introducing the Murderous Maggie Leach.
Yes, thank you so much to all of our top-tier donors, especially Maggie. We're so happy to have you a part of this great community. We're so happy to have you and hope you enjoy all that bonus content.
Yes, please like, rate, subscribe, tell your friends and family. And of course, Spotify now has a star system, so please give us 5 stars on that as well. All right, well, citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.
Goodbye.